Hello and welcome. You're watching Pulse of Africa News and stay with us. The African Union Election Observation Mission has launched its observer orientation and briefing in Addis Ababa ahead of Ethiopia's first June 2026 general elections. The African Union Election Observation Mission is in Ethiopia to observe the upcoming general elections. The high-level mission, deployed at the formal invitation of the government of Ethiopia, is being led by former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta. The mission is deploying 73 short-term observers drawn from 37 African countries, with women making up 61% of the team. The observers include election officials, civil society representatives, human rights experts, gender specialists, media professionals, and youth delegates. Over the two-day briefing, the participants will cover election-related issues, including the Code of Conduct for AU election observers, security awareness briefing, political environment, and key findings on the pre-election assessment mission. They will also discuss on political and historical context of the 2026 elections, constitutional and legal framework of the 2026 elections in Ethiopia, perspective of the electoral process from Ethiopian CSOS, the AU methodology of election observation benchmarks, and principles for democratic elections. The briefings also cover international and AU instruments for election assessments, media landscape and the role of the media in elections, and an overview of election administration by the National Election Board of Ethiopia. The observers will be deployed across different regions of Ethiopia to monitor key election day activities, including the opening of polling stations, voting procedures, voting counting, and the tabulation of results. The AU-EOM stated that its assessment will be guided by Ethiopia's legal framework governing elections, the OAU Declaration on the Principles Governing Democratic Elections in Africa, the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, and other regional and international standards for democratic elections. During its mission, the AU delegation is also expected to engage with state institutions, the National Election Board of Ethiopia, political parties, candidates, civil society organizations, media representatives, members of the diplomatic community, the other election observation mission operating in the country. The mission is scheduled to release a preliminary statement on its observation and assessment of the electoral process during a press conference in Addis Ababa on June 3, 2026, according to the African Union. A final and comprehensive report containing the mission's findings and recommendations will be published within 2 months after the elections. In related news, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, has announced the deployment of its election observation mission to Ethiopia ahead of the country's 7th general election scheduled for 1st June 2026. In its press statement sent to POA, the regional bloc said the mission was deployed at the invitation of the government of Ethiopia and the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia, underscoring ongoing regional engagement in supporting democratic and electoral processes across the Horn of Africa. The IGAD mission is led by former Vice President of Uganda, Speciosa Wandira Kazibwe, and former President of the National Assembly of Djibouti, deputized by Mohamed Ali Hamoud. The delegation comprises 26 short-term observers drawn from IGAD member states, including representatives from election management bodies, civil society organizations, and women's and youth groups. According to IGAD's observers will be deployed across several regional states, as well as the Addis Ababa and Redha city administration, where they will monitor key stages of the electoral process on polling day, including the opening of polling station, voting procedures, ballot counting, and the closing of polls. The mission said its assessment will be guided by Ethiopia's electoral laws and regional and international democratic frameworks, including the IGAD draft protocol on democracy, governance, and elections, the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance, and the Declaration of Principles for International Election Observation. As part of its mandate, the delegation is expected to engage a broad range of electoral stakeholders, including the National Electoral Board, the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, security institutions, political parties, civil society groups, media representatives, and both domestic and international observers organizations. IGAD stated that the mission will issue a preliminary assessment of the conduct of the election during a press conference scheduled for 3rd June 2026 at the Skylight Hotel in Addis Ababa. A comprehensive final report will follow after the official announcement of the election results by NEBE. The deployment comes as Ethiopia draws heightened regional and international attention over its democratic transition, electoral inclusiveness, and political stability, with observers viewing the election as an important test of institutional credibility and democratic governance in Africa's second most populous nation. While still focusing on Ethiopia, the chairperson of the National Election Board of Ethiopia, NEBE, Melatwork Hailu, has commended stakeholders and institutions for their role in successfully organizing national election debates ahead of the country's 7th general election scheduled for June 1, 2026. The election debate process was finalized on Wednesday in line with the official electoral timetable, with the country now entering the final stage ahead of voting day on Monday. According to NEBE, more than 50 million registered voters are expected to participate in the upcoming election, making it one of the largest electoral exercises in Africa. Thousands of voting centers across the country have been prepared to facilitate nationwide polling, including in urban and rural areas, to ensure broad accessibility for citizens. Speaking on the significance of the debates, the chairperson of NEBE noted that one of the unique features of this year's election is the active involvement of the election board in organizing and leading the national election debates. Although Ethiopia has conducted 6 parliamentary elections over the past 3 decades, none of these previous election debates had been organized directly by the election board. According to the chairperson, the board initiated the debates to enable political parties to present their policies and manifestos to the public, while also helping voters access the information necessary to make informed decisions. She further stated that the debates were designed to promote inclusivity by ensuring the participation and representation of women, persons with disabilities, and other underrepresented groups in society. Melatwork added that extensive efforts had been undertaken to guarantee the fairness, inclusiveness, and effectiveness of the debate. The chairperson noted that including neutral professionals from academia, the media, civil society, organizations, and other institutions have been engaged in organizing and leading the election debate. Melatwork concluded by thanking all stakeholders for their contributions, describing the election debate process as a historic milestone in strengthening Ethiopia's democratic culture and reinforcing public trust ahead of the national vote. Welcome back, viewers. You're still watching Pulse of Africa, and our story continues. Africa's continued exclusion from permanent membership is a structural injustice the world can no longer afford to ignore, Zimbabwe's Foreign Affairs and International Trade Minister Amen Murwira said. The minister told a high-level UN debate convened by China that the world's most powerful organ must be fundamentally restructured to reflect contemporary geopolitical realities. He said that Africa's exclusion from its permanent ranks stands as one of the most glaring injustices of the post-war international order.
The Republic of Zimbabwe remains committed to a United Nations Security Council that reflects contemporary geopolitical realities, not 1945. Its legitimacy and effectiveness requires comprehensive reform that is member state driven, that corrects the historical injustices, for example, in particularly Africa's exclusion from the permanent membership and its underrepresentation in the non-permanent category. 80 years after the founding of the United Nations, the United Nations Charter remains both our shield and our compass, guaranteeing durable peace and security. For Africa, the Charter also carried and still carries the promise and delivery of self-determination, dignity, and sovereign equality.
The legitimacy and effectiveness of the Security Council requires comprehensive reform that corrects historical injustices, particularly Africa's exclusion from permanent membership and its underrepresentation in the non-permanent category. The Republic of Zimbabwe remains committed to a United Nations Security Council that reflects contemporary geopolitical realities, not 1945. No single country, however powerful, could secure peace and prosperity in isolation, he argued, citing armed conflicts, terrorism, climate change, pandemics, cyber threats, and economic instability as challenges that demand renewed solidarity. A recurring theme in Minister Murwira's address was the disproportionate burden Africa bears in global instability while contributing least to many of its structural causes. Invoking Chapter 8 of the United Nations Charter, he called for strengthened cooperation between the Security Council and the African Union.
Africa continues to carry a disproportionate burden of conflict and insecurity while contributing least to many structural causes of global instability. In line with Chapter 8 of the Charter, it is imperative to strengthen cooperation between the Security Council and regional organizations, particularly the African Union. Zimbabwe, therefore, calls for the full balanced implementation of Security Council Resolution 2719. We also stress that sustainable peace requires addressing root causes, including poverty, exclusion, and underdevelopment plus inequality.
In line with Chapter 8 of the Charter, it is imperative to strengthen cooperation between the Security Council and the African Union. Shifting to this hour's business news, the African Development Bank has announced that Africa's economy expanded by 4.4% in 2025, making the continent the fastest growing major region globally despite ongoing geopolitical and economic challenges. According to the bank's latest Africa Economic Outlook, 22 African countries recorded economic growth above 5%, while 6 countries exceeded 7% growth during the year. The report said Africa's strong performance was driven by improved agricultural production, rising commodity prices, easing monetary conditions, and structural economic reforms across several countries. The continent's growth rate surpassed the global average of 3.1% and is expected to remain strong, with projections of 4.2% growth in 2026 and 4.4% in 2027. However, the African Development Bank warned that Africa continues to face a major development financing gap exceeding $1.3 trillion annually to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. The bank attributed the shortfall to weak domestic resource mobilization, limited financial intermediation, and declining international development support. It urged African governments to strengthen revenue collection, combat corruption and illicit financial flows, deepen capital markets, and expand public-private partnership to unlock more local financing for development. The report also highlighted the need for a stronger African-led financial architecture capable of mobilizing the continent's vast domestic resources to support long-term economic transformation. The government of Zimbabwe and Geo Associates, the local subsidiary of Invictus Energy, have signed a landmark petroleum production sharing agreement, paving the way for the country's first commercial oil and gas development. According to Invictus Energy, the agreement establishes a hybrid production sharing model that allows the Zimbabwean government to receive either a share of profit or part of the gas produced from future projects. The deal covers the Cabora Basin in northern Zimbabwe, where the Mukuyu gas field was ranked among sub-Saharan Africa's largest petroleum discoveries in 2023. Finally, sports news. Senegal's national football team, the Lion of Teranga, officially received the national flag ahead of the 2026 FIFA World Cup during a high-profile ceremony held in Dakar. The national flag was presented by the President of the Republic in the presence of the Prime Minister, the Minister of Sport, and the President of the Senegalese Football Federation, symbolizing the country's full support for the team's World Cup journey. The ceremony official marked the launch of Senegal's campaign for the global tournament, with national leaders expressing confidence in the team's ability to make history on the world stage. Addressing the players and officials, the President Bassirou Diomaye praised the Lions of Teranga for their achievements and encouraged them to aim even higher at the World Cup. Senegal heads into the 2026 World Cup with high expectations as one of Africa's strongest football nations, backed by passionate supporters across the continent. That wraps up this hour's Pulse of Africa news. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and follow our Facebook page, and for the latest headlines, follow us on TikTok. I'm Faoud Namak. Thank you for joining us.